Hi, welcome to the Aftermath Tales. Ready for a new story? Very well, let's begin.
How could you sleep with my sister in our bed? The question cut through the room like a blade. I watched their faces transform. First shock, then fear, and finally that terrible relief. The relief of people who no longer have to hide. My name is Elaine Morgan, 30 years old. This is the story of how I discovered my husband Ricky's affair with my sister Ina, and what happened after. I met Ricky Taylor at a friend's barbecue 8 years ago. He stood out immediately, confident without being arrogant, ambitious without being ruthless. When he laughed, his whole face participated in the joy. I remember thinking, this is what happiness looks like in human form. We married a year later. Nothing fancy. A small ceremony in my parents' backyard. My sister Ina was my maid of honor, stunning as always in pale blue. People often asked if we were really sisters, Ina with her perfect features and graceful presence, me with my practical mind and quiet demeanor. "You got the brains, I got the beauty," she would joke. I never minded. I loved my sister, and I had found my perfect match in Ricky. Our early years together were beautiful in their simplicity. We rented a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood. Ricky worked as a supervisor at Meridian Enterprises, a prestigious company downtown. I worked from home most days as an IT security analyst, only going to the office once a week for meetings. We were comfortable but not extravagant. Happy. "Just wait until I make manager," Ricky would say, wrapping his arms around me while I cooked dinner. "We'll get that house with the garden you've always wanted." I believed him. I believed in us. Then came the diagnosis. A rare reproductive condition the doctors discovered during routine testing. The specialists were apologetic but firm. I would never be able to have biological children. At 28, I lost something I hadn't even realized how badly I wanted until it was taken from me. "It's okay," Ricky said, holding my hand as we left the specialist's office. "We have each other. That's enough." And I thought it was. For him. For us. 2 years passed. We settled into our new normal. We discussed adoption sometimes, but never seriously. We traveled more, started a small renovation on the apartment. Life was good. Then came my father's 60th birthday party. My parents, Marshall and Rita Morgan, hosted a dinner at their home. My father, still working as an accountant despite being at retirement age, beamed with pride as he introduced his family to colleagues. My mother, elegant as ever at 60, had prepared a feast. And Ina, my beautiful sister, arrived late as usual, but made an entrance that turned every head. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, kissing my father's cheek. "Work has been crazy." Over dinner, my mother shared the news. "Ina's been promoted to manager at her company, but the new office is on the other side of town, near your place, Elaine." "The commute is killing me," Ina sighed, twirling pasta around her fork. "And the apartments in that area are so expensive." My mother's hint wasn't subtle. "Couldn't she stay with you and Ricky temporarily? Just until she finds something affordable?" I glanced at Ricky. He smiled. "Family helps family," he said easily. "We have the 2nd bedroom, it's no problem." No problem. If only I had known. Ina moved in 2 weeks later. Her temporary stay had a vague timeline. "Just a few months, max," she promised, hauling designer suitcases into our guest room. "You guys are lifesavers." The first month was actually pleasant. Ina brought a new energy to our home. She cooked elaborate meals sometimes. She made Ricky laugh with stories from her office. She and I had late-night talks like when we were teenagers, whispering secrets and dreams. By month 3, small irritations appeared. Dishes left in the sink, makeup scattered across the shared bathroom counter, comments about how cozy our apartment was, code for small. But these were minor issues. Family adapts. I'm still looking for places, Ina assured us over dinner one night, 6 months into her stay. "But these credit card bills are killing me. The people at work expect a certain image, you know?" I didn't know. My job valued competence over appearance. But I nodded sympathetically. Ricky refilled her wine glass. "Stay as long as you need," he said. "We're happy to help." What I didn't tell either of them was that my part-time job paid extraordinarily well. I was one of the top security analysts in the company, working reduced hours only because I valued my freedom. My salary was nearly triple what Ricky made, but I'd never told him. His pride was important to him, and our arrangement worked. He handled the visible bills. Rent, utilities, groceries. I quietly managed our investments, retirement accounts, and savings, paying for the majority of our lifestyle without him ever knowing. The money wasn't important. Our partnership was, until it wasn't. It began with rain. I remember the steady drumming against the windows as I drove home early from my monthly department meeting. A power outage had cut the session short. I wasn't expected home for hours. The apartment was quiet when I entered, shaking water from my umbrella. No cars in the garage meant I had the place to myself. I kicked off my shoes, made a cup of tea, and settled on the couch with my laptop. That's when I saw it. A small plastic stick on the coffee table, partially hidden under a magazine. A pregnancy test. Positive. Time seemed to slow as I stared at those two pink lines. My body felt cold, then hot, then numb. I couldn't have children. Everyone knew this. So whose test was this? The answer came immediately, sickening in its clarity. Ina's, of course. My sister was pregnant. But why hide it? Why not share the news? Unless the father was someone she couldn't acknowledge, unless the father was my husband. I didn't cry then. Something in me shifted instead, my analytical mind taking control. I carefully placed the test back exactly as I'd found it and retreated to our bedroom. That night, I watched them at dinner. Was Ricky's smile toward Ina a bit too warm? Did her hand linger on his shoulder a moment too long when she passed him the salt? Were those meaningful glances, or was my imagination poisoning ordinary interactions? "You're quiet tonight," Ricky observed, loading the dishwasher after dinner. "Tired," I said. "Long meeting." For 2 weeks I observed them. I noted small changes I'd previously overlooked. Ricky's new cologne, his sudden interest in his appearance, Ina's mysterious outings that perfectly aligned with Ricky's late meetings, the way they both checked their phones constantly, smiling at messages they wouldn't share. I needed proof. Not for divorce court, for myself. I needed to know I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining things. I ordered the cameras online, paying with my personal credit card. Nothing elaborate, small devices easily disguised as ordinary objects. I installed them while they were both at work. One looked like a USB wall charger in the living room. Another replaced our kitchen smoke detector. A third hid within the bookshelf by the entryway. Then I created opportunities for them to be alone. I worked late one night a week. I scheduled girls' trips on weekends that I never took, instead sitting in a cafe across town, watching the camera feeds on my secured laptop. The first betrayal I witnessed was small, Ricky's hand brushing against Ina's waist as they passed in the kitchen, lingering there while they shared a look. I watched, my coffee growing cold, as this small touch evolved into a kiss when they thought the house was empty. I documented everything with clinical precision. Text messages recovered from our home network, video clips saved with timestamps and dates, bank statements showing money gradually diverted to an account I'd never heard of. The most damning evidence came from a doctor's bill that fell from Ina's purse, an OB/GYN visit. I photographed it before sliding it back where it had fallen. Later that week, I overheard them in the kitchen when they thought I was in the shower. 12 weeks, Ina said, her voice hushed but happy. "Everything looks perfect. We need to be careful," Ricky replied. "We need more time to figure this out." 12 weeks. The timeline matched perfectly. Their affair had started almost immediately after she moved in. The betrayal was absolute, my husband, my sister, in my home, creating the family I could never give him. I continued my charade. I worked late. I smiled at breakfast. I pretended not to notice when Ricky's affection toward me cooled, when his criticisms increased. I documented every change, every lie. Meanwhile, I prepared. I consulted a divorce attorney without telling anyone. I secured my personal finances. I applied for positions at other companies, far away from here. And I received an offer, Senior Security Director at Axiom Technologies. Triple my current salary, based in Seattle, across the country from our East Coast apartment. The pieces were falling into place. I chose a Thursday evening for the confrontation. Ricky would be tired from work, but not exhausted. Ina would be home. I'd ordered dinner delivered. No cooking to distract from what was coming. I dressed carefully that morning. The navy blue dress Ricky had always liked, minimal makeup, hair loose the way he preferred. Not for him, but for me. For the last memory I would give him of what he had thrown away. "Can we talk after dinner?" Ricky asked as we ate, exchanging a quick glance with Ina. "There's something we want to discuss with you." I smiled, serene with foreknowledge. Actually, I have something I'd like to share with both of you first, in the living room, after we eat. They helped clear the dishes, an unusual occurrence that would have once pleased me. Now I recognized it for what it was: guilt, preparing confession. In the living room, I connected my laptop to our television. They sat side by side on the couch, not touching, but together nonetheless. I remained standing. "I've been working on a special project," I said calmly. "I'd like your opinion on it." The first video began to play. Ricky and Ina in our kitchen 3 weeks ago, his hands on her waist, their kiss hungry and familiar. Another clip, them on our couch, my couch, their whispered endearments picked up by the hidden microphone. Another, their conversation about the baby, their baby. Video after video played, text message screenshots appeared, bank statements, the doctor's bill, all meticulously organized, time-stamped, undeniable, their faces drained of color. Ina gripped the armrest. Ricky stared at the floor. When the screen finally went dark, I stood in the silence, my heart hammering but my voice steady. "How could you sleep with my sister in our bed?" Ina recovered first, tears springing to her eyes on command. "Elaine, it's not." "If you say it's not what it looks like, I will lose what little respect I have left for your intelligence," I interrupted. "It's exactly what it looks like. You're having an affair with my husband, you're pregnant with his child, and you've been living under my roof while betraying me for nearly a year." Ricky looked up then, his face a mask of contrition. "We were going to tell you tonight. We never meant for this to happen." "Really?" I asked, gesturing to the screen which now showed their text messages from 3 months ago, planning how to break the news after the first trimester. "Because it seems you've been carefully planning this for quite some time." Ina's tears flowed freely now. "I'm sorry. We fell in love. You can't help who you fall in love with." "In my bed," I said quietly. "You fell in love in my bed, in my home, behind my back, while I cooked for you, did your laundry, listened to your problems. While I grieved the children I could never have, you created one with my husband." "Elaine, please," Ricky pleaded, standing now. "We can figure this out. We care about you. We didn't want to hurt you." That's when something inside me broke. And then, immediately, something hardened. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging within me. "I've accepted a position in Seattle. My flight is tomorrow morning." Their shock was palpable. This clearly wasn't the reaction they had expected. "You're leaving?" Ricky stammered. "Just like that?" "What did you expect?" I asked. "That I'd stay here? Continue living in this apartment where you've been betraying me? Watch as my sister's stomach grows with your child?" "But this is your home," Ina said, confusion evident in her voice. I laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "No, Ina, this stopped being my home the moment you two decided to destroy it." I walked to our bedroom, my bedroom, and retrieved the small suitcase I had packed that morning while they were at work. I had already moved most of my important possessions to a storage unit over the past few weeks. What remained were just things. Replaceable things. "The lease is in my name," I told Ricky as I wheeled my suitcase into the living room. "I've spoken with the management company. They'll transfer it to you if you want to stay here." Ricky looked stunned. "But how will we—" "That's not my problem anymore," I cut him off. "You wanted to play house with my sister? Congratulations. Now you get to figure out how to make it work." I handed him a thick envelope. "Divorce papers. My lawyer will contact you." "Elaine, wait," Ina pleaded, tears still streaming down her face. "We can talk about this. We can figure something out." "We're long past that," I said, picking up my purse and keying my car unlocked from the door. "I hope you'll both be very happy together." "Where will you go tonight?" Ricky asked, following me to the door. I turned to face him one last time. "I've arranged a hotel. Don't worry about me, Ricky. I'll be just fine." "How?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Your job is part-time. The salary is—" I smiled then, a small, satisfied smile. "You never asked how much I earned, did you? You just assumed it was pocket money. Watch me." And with that, I walked out, leaving them standing in the doorway of what had once been our home, confusion and dawning realization on their faces. I didn't look back as I drove away. My hands were steady on the wheel, my mind clear despite the emotional earthquake I'd just experienced. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, but the reality of it, the finality, still took my breath away. The day I discovered their betrayal broke me. But now the tears have dried. I have nothing left to give them. The hotel room I'd booked was nothing special, but it represented something precious, the first night of my new life. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my laptop, and composed one final email to Ricky. I attached my pay stubs for the past 6 months, investment account statements, bank records, all showing figures that I knew would make his stomach drop when he saw them. I added detailed records of our household finances, showing I had been paying 75% of our expenses while letting him believe he was the provider. The final attachment was a spreadsheet showing a cost analysis of what his new life would entail: rent for the apartment, childcare costs, medical expenses for a pregnancy and newborn, food, utilities, transportation. I knew the total would be staggering, far beyond what he could afford on his salary alone, especially now that he would be responsible for all of it without my substantial but hidden contribution. My message was simple. I'm not vengeful enough to interfere with your job, that's not who I am. But I want you to understand exactly what you threw away and what you're facing now. Reality is the best punishment I can offer you. P.S. As you have already know, I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact you. I'm seeking no alimony since, as you now know, I don't need your financial support. I never did. I hit send, then shut my laptop. I didn't feel vindictive, just deeply sad. All this time, Ricky had prided himself on being the provider, the successful one in our marriage. He'd patronizingly told me to buy myself something nice with my spending money from my part-time job. He'd promised me a better life once he made manager, never knowing I could have provided that better life all along. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The weight of suspicion, of pretending, of collecting evidence had exhausted me more than I'd realized. Now, even with the uncertainty of my future looming, I felt lighter. The next morning, I boarded a plane to Seattle without looking back. Starting over at 30 wasn't easy, but it was liberating. I rented a small apartment with a view of Puget Sound, threw myself into my new job, and gradually built a life that was entirely my own. No secrets, no pretending to be less than I was to protect someone else's ego. I heard updates from my parents occasionally. Ina had been demoted at work, anonymous concerns about her expense reports and financial judgment. Ricky's promised promotion had mysteriously evaporated. They'd had to move to a smaller apartment on the outskirts of town when they couldn't afford the one I'd left them. I took no pleasure in their struggles. I hadn't actively sabotaged either of their careers. I'd simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions. Reality was punishment enough. 7 years later. 7 years. That's how long it had been since I'd left everything behind. 7 years of building a new life, of healing, of becoming someone stronger than the woman who had driven away with tears streaming down her face and determination in her heart. I hadn't planned to return. But my father's 68th birthday provided an occasion I couldn't ignore, especially after he'd weathered a health scare the previous year. So here I was, back in my hometown, driving a rental car toward my parents' house with Thomas beside me and Emma, now 9, in the back seat playing a game on her tablet. Thomas Harrington had entered my life unexpectedly, at a cybersecurity conference 18 months after I'd left. Our conversation about network vulnerabilities had turned into dinner, which evolved into something I hadn't been looking for but needed nonetheless. Love based on mutual respect and admiration. He was the founder and CEO of Harrington Solutions, a thriving cybersecurity firm, though few would guess his worth from his unassuming manner and simple dress. Thomas had built his fortune through hard work and innovation, preferring quality but understated clothes and driving a practical mid-range car. What impressed me most was not his success, but his humility. His ability to listen, to value others for their contributions rather than their status. We had married after a year of dating, and Emma, his daughter from his first marriage, had quickly formed a bond with me. Thomas's first wife had died of cancer when Emma was still a toddler, leaving the girl with no real memories of her birth mother. To Emma, I was simply Mom, a title I'd earned through countless bedtime stories, homework help sessions, and unwavering love. "Are you nervous?" Thomas asked as we turned onto my parents' street. "A little," I admitted. "It's been a long time." 7 years is a lifetime, he agreed, squeezing my hand. But you're not the same woman who left. The reunion with my parents was emotional but healing. They welcomed Thomas warmly and treated Emma like the grandchild they'd always dreamed of having. But beneath the joy of reconnection lay the unspoken question of Ina, Ricky, and their children, my niece and nephew whom I had never met. It was my mother who finally broached the subject on the second day of our visit. Ina asks about you, she said carefully as we prepared dinner. They still live here in town. My hand stilled on the cutting board. And they struggle, my mother said simply. Ricky never got the promotion he expected. Ina works part-time now. They have Grace, she's 7, and a little boy, Nathan, who's 4. I absorbed this information without comment. Grace is a thoughtful child, my mother continued. She asks about you. She found your picture in our family album, wanted to know who the pretty lady was. Something in my chest tightened. Children, innocence, not responsible for the circumstances of their birth or the actions of their parents. Would you consider seeing them? My mother asked gently. Not for them, for Grace and Nathan, for your own closure. That night, I discussed the possibility with Thomas. Whatever you decide, I support you, he said. But ask yourself what you hope to get from the meeting. Vindication? Forgiveness? Something else entirely? The next morning, a text arrived from my mother. Ina and the children will be at Wellington Park at 11. No pressure. Your decision entirely. Do you want me to come? Thomas asked. I shook my head. This is something I need to do alone. I drove to the park slowly, giving myself time to reconsider, to turn around. But a part of me needed this. Needed to see what had become of the sister who had betrayed me, the husband who had broken my heart, and the children who were, despite everything, my family. The park was just as I remembered, the same duck pond, the same playground, the same walking paths where Ina and I had once played as children. I spotted them immediately on a bench near the swings. Ina, considerably heavier, but still beautiful in her own way, wearing a simple floral maternity dress that strained across her expanded midsection. Beside her, a girl with dark curls and eyes that immediately reminded me of Ricky, and a smaller boy playing with action figures at her feet. Ina stood as I approached, one hand protectively on her daughter's shoulder, the other resting on her visibly pregnant belly. A third child on the way. Elaine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for coming. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. I sat on the bench, leaving space between us. This is Grace, Ina said softly. And Nathan, children, this is your Aunt Elaine. Grace looked up, studying me with solemn curiosity. Hello, she said clearly, a thoughtfulness in her eyes that seemed beyond her 7 years. Nathan, shyer, half hid behind his sister. Hello, I replied, surprised by the warmth I felt looking at these children, these pieces of Ricky and Ina that somehow held no trace of the pain they'd caused me. Are you my auntie? Grace asked. The one in the pictures at Grandma's house? Yes, I confirmed. I'm your mother's sister. Grace tilted her head. Why haven't I met you before? Ina tensed beside me, but I found myself smiling gently. I live far away, in Seattle, by the ocean. Grace's eyes widened. With fishies and boats? With lots of fish and boats, I confirmed. And mountains, too. Grace nodded, satisfied with this answer for now. She turned to her brother. Nate, Auntie Elaine lives by the ocean, with fish. The little boy peeked up, intrigued despite his shyness. Can we go play on the swings? Grace asked her mother. Ina nodded. Stay where I can see you. As the children ran toward the playground, Ina turned to me. They've been asking about you since they found your picture at Mom and Dad's. I didn't know what to tell them. The truth would have been a start, I said, more sharply than I'd intended. Which version? Ina asked quietly. The one where I was selfish and cruel and destroyed my sister's marriage, or one they could actually understand at 7 and 4? I watched Grace help her brother onto a swing. They seem happy. They are, Ina said. They're the best things in our lives. After a pause, she added, I know that doesn't excuse what we did. No, I agreed. It doesn't. I'm sorry, she said, the words rushing out as if she'd been holding them back for years. I'm so sorry, Elaine. What we did, what I did, was unforgivable. I've spent 7 years trying to figure out how to apologize, knowing there aren't words adequate for the betrayal. How are you? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Ina seemed taken aback. We're managing. It's been hard. My demotion came with a significant pay cut. Ricky's career stalled completely. Hugh, the debt, she shook her head. We're getting by, but it's not what we expected. And the third baby? Ina placed a hand on her belly. A surprise. Not planned, given our situation, but she smiled faintly. We'll figure it out. We fell silent, watching the children play. Mom says you're married, Ina ventured. With a stepdaughter. Yes, Thomas and Emma. The simple statement felt like both a fact and a declaration of victory. I found happiness despite what you took from me. Before Ina could respond, a familiar voice called from across the playground. Grace, be careful pushing your brother. Ricky stopped abruptly when he saw me, frozen in place 20 feet away. He looked different. Thinner, with significant gray at his temples despite being only 39. His clothes were casual but worn, his expression stunned. Elaine, he said, my name sounding foreign on his lips. I didn't know you were in town. Just visiting my parents, I said, standing. The power dynamic was immediate and obvious. Me in my designer clothes, him in faded jeans and a stretched-out polo shirt. Daddy, Grace called, running over to hug his legs. This is my Auntie Elaine. She lives with fishies and boats. Ricky's face cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Shock, embarrassment, a flash of anger, and finally something that looked like shame. I see you've met your aunt, he said to Grace, then to me. They've been asking about you. So I've heard. Can Auntie Elaine come to our house? Grace asked eagerly. I want to show her my books and Nathan's toys. The panic on both Ricky and Ina's faces might have been comical in another context. Grace, honey, Ina began. Aunt Elaine is very busy. Actually, I interrupted, surprised by my own words, I'd like to see where you live, if that's okay. The shock on their faces was complete. Ricky recovered first. Of course, it's nothing fancy, but you're welcome. Their apartment was indeed modest, a 2-bedroom unit in an aging complex on the outskirts of town. Grace proudly showed me her small bedroom that she shared with Nathan, pointing out her bookshelf and his toy collection with equal pride. In the living room, the adults sat in awkward silence until Ricky finally spoke. You look well, he said stiffly. Your parents mentioned you're doing well in Seattle. I am, I confirmed. I'm the security director at my husband's company now. And what does he do? Ricky asked, an edge to his voice. He owns Harrington Solutions. It's a cybersecurity firm. Ricky's jaw tightened at this information, jealousy flashing across his face. Sounds impressive. It is, I said simply. Thomas built it from nothing. Started in his garage with one client. Now they protect half the Fortune 500. Ricky's face flushed with naked envy as the implications sank in. So he's successful. Very, I confirmed, not elaborating further. The understated way I said it made it clear that successful was an extreme understatement. As I studied Ricky's face, I saw something unexpected beneath his jealousy, a flash of longing, of regret that went beyond their current circumstances. He wasn't just envious of my success. He was mourning what he'd thrown away. You still love her, don't you? Ina asked quietly, the realization dawning on her face. Ricky's expression crumpled. He couldn't finish the sentence, but his silence was answer enough. I felt no triumph in this revelation. Instead, I felt a wave of protectiveness toward my sister, who had already been hurt enough. Ricky, I said softly but firmly, look at your daughter. Look at your son. Look at your wife who's carrying your third child. If someday someone does to Grace what you did to me, how would you feel? If he marries someone like you, if a man she trusted, a man she loved, betrayed her in the most painful way possible. Ricky's eyes darted to Grace, who was helping Nathan build a tower with blocks in the corner of the living room. Something shifted in his expression, the jealousy giving way to shame, the anger to understanding. And if someday, I continued, you discover that Ina has done to you what you both did to me, remember this moment. Remember how easily trust can be broken, and how devastating that betrayal feels. Ina, tears streaming down her face, reached for Ricky's hand, not demanding, not pleading, just connecting. After a moment of hesitation, he took it. We've made so many mistakes, Ina whispered, but loving our children has never been one of them. Ricky looked at his daughter and son again, and his expression softened. No, he agreed. That's the one thing we got right. The tension in the room eased, not disappearing entirely, but transforming into something less volatile, more contemplative. Ina sent me a look of quiet gratitude. A week later, I agreed to meet them at a local park. Thomas and Emma came along, and while the children played together on the swings, the adults sat at a nearby picnic table, conversation stilted but civil. Grace had taken to Emma immediately, following the older girl around with undisguised admiration. Nathan, after initial shyness, had been won over by Emma's patient inclusion of him in their games. Their laughter carried across the playground, a joyful counterpoint to the awkward silence among the adults. When the children ran off to get ice cream from a nearby stand, Thomas trailing behind to pay, Grace suddenly turned back, running to me with an earnest expression. "Auntie Elaine," she said, her small face serious, "I heard Mommy and Daddy talking late at night when they thought we were sleeping." I exchanged a quick glance with Ina, who looked alarmed. "They said they did something that hurt you very badly," Grace continued. "I don't understand exactly what they did, but Grandma told me that sometimes forgiving people who hurt you can help your heart heal. She said it sets you free from the sad feelings." The innocent wisdom in those words, spoken in a child's voice, caught me off guard. Grace looked up at me with Ricky's eyes, but none of his guile. "Do you forgive my Mommy and Daddy?" she asked softly. "Please don't be sad anymore. I want you to be part of our family, not just when you visit. I want to know my auntie." I felt my carefully constructed walls begin to crack. Not because I suddenly excused what they had done, but because this innocent child had cut straight to the heart of something I had been wrestling with, the weight of carrying unforgiveness, even when it was justified. "Grace," I began carefully, "forgiveness is complicated." "Why?" Grace pressed with a child's persistence. "Mommy says I have to forgive my friend Lily when she broke my crayon, even though it was my favorite one." Despite everything, I felt a smile tug at my lips. This is a little bigger than a broken crayon. "But does it still make your heart hurt?" Grace asked, placing her small hand on mine. "Yes," I admitted. "It did. For a long time." "And does it still?" I considered this, truly considered it. The betrayal had changed me, pushed me onto a different path, one that had ultimately led to Thomas, to Emma, to a life even more fulfilling than the one I'd lost. "No," I realized aloud, "it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." "Then maybe you already forgave them a little bit?" Grace suggested hopefully. Ina, who had been silently watching this exchange, wiped away a tear. Ricky stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Maybe I have," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Not complete forgiveness, perhaps, but the beginning of it. A release of the anger that had once defined me. Grace beamed. "Good, because I really want you to be happy, Auntie Elaine." As the child skipped back to join Emma and Thomas at the ice cream stand, I was left with the disarming realization that I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy. And that happiness was no longer defined by what Ricky and Ina had done to me, but by what I had built from the wreckage they'd left behind. 3 months later, as Thomas and I prepared to return to Seattle after an extended visit, he surprised everyone with an announcement at dinner. "Harrington Solutions is opening an East Coast office," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "Right here in town, actually." Ricky nearly choked on his water. "Here? But this isn't exactly a tech hub." Thomas shrugged. "The building is affordable, the location is convenient for our East Coast clients, and," he glanced at me, "I happen to have it on good authority that there's qualified management talent available locally." The implication hung in the air for a moment before Ricky understood. "Me? You want me to?" "Elaine speaks highly of your organizational skills and attention to detail," Thomas said. "She mentioned you've been looking for an opportunity to advance beyond your current position. We need someone who understands the local business landscape to manage the office." Ricky looked at me in disbelief. After everything, I had recommended him? I nodded slightly, confirming Thomas's words. "I don't know what to say," Ricky managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Say you'll consider it," Thomas replied. "The position comes with a substantial salary increase and—" He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a set of keys, company housing. He slid the keys across the table. "There's a 3-bedroom house near the new office, part of our executive package, room for a growing family." Ina, who had been silent until now, one hand resting on her newborn son sleeping in a carrier beside her, looked up with tears in her eyes. "Why would you do this for us?" "I'm not," Thomas said simply. I'm doing it because it makes good business sense to have a strong local manager. But the housing, he smiled at me, that was my wife's suggestion. Later that night, as Thomas was loading our luggage into the car for our early morning flight, Ricky approached me in the kitchen. "I don't deserve this," he said quietly. "Not after what I did to you." "No," I agreed. "You don't. But your 3 kids deserve opportunities and a stable home. They're my niece and nephews. I love them, and I want to see them thrive. And Ina deserves a partner who puts his family first." "I will," Ricky promised, tears streaming down his face. "I swear to you, I'll be the man I should have been before." "Do it for them," I said, "not for me." I turned to leave, but Ricky's next words stopped me. "Elaine," he said, his voice breaking, "I am so sorry for everything. You didn't just give us a job and a home, you gave us a second chance when you had every right to want us to suffer." I thought about Grace's simple question about forgiveness, about the weight I'd carried for years, about the peace I'd found not in vengeance, but in building something new and beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. "I didn't do it for you, Ricky," I said softly. "I did it for me, because Grace was right. Forgiveness does set you free." They had meant to discard me. Instead, they had liberated me. And in that liberation, I found the strength to liberate them too.
If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and drop a comment below. Don't forget to follow for more content just like this. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.